Hi, Nova. How you doing today?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Are we all
Well, how about you?
good? I see Mr. Burns, Mr. Resendez, Mr. Perez, and Ms. Spencer. Perfect. Thank you. It is 4 o'clock, so this time we're going to call to order the special meeting of March 22nd, 2021. Mr. Burns, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. We'll now move to roll call, please.
Councilmember Perez,
Present.
Vice Mayor Resendez,
Present.
Councilmember Spencer,
Present.
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Mayor Velasquez,
Here.
City Manager Miller,
Present.
City Attorney Epperson,
Here.
Interim Police Chief Reynoso.
Here.
The agenda for the City of Hollister City Council special meeting of March 22nd, 2021 was posted on the bulletin board on March 19th, 2021 at 2:10 p.m. per Government Code Section 54956.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item A1.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is for a resolution to enter into a 5-year lease agreement with Neil Jones Foods for the lease of Pond 1 at our industrial wastewater facility. I have with us tonight, or this afternoon, sorry, is Carrie Wagner for Wallace Group to kind of help give some information that was not on the last council meeting.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Thank you for having me. This is Carrie Wagner with Wallace Group. I appreciate you taking the time to talk this afternoon. I apologize I was not available last Monday to talk about this item. And from my understanding is that the City Council approved the lease agreement, but there was a condition placed on the lease agreement to also require San Benito Foods to remove 50% of the sludge from Pond 1 in year 1, and then 25% in year 2, and the remaining 25% in year 3. And I am respectfully requesting to have the City Council rescind that amendment to the lease agreement. There's a couple of reasons why I'm requesting that. And I know we've talked many times at length about City Council holding San Benito Foods to the removal of sludge, which we have done in Pond 2 successfully. You know, we've managed the sludge removal of Pond 2 to comply with the stormwater pond and the city moving forward with stormwater treatment. We've also been very successful with working with San Benito Foods over the last, I don't know how many months, on the preparation and the development of the lease agreement. San Benito Foods has come a very long way in stepping up and really doing what's right for the environment, and is proposing a project to upgrade Pond 1 and do the required upgrades that are needed to meet the basin objectives and work with the regional board on meeting the WDR, their waste discharge requirement, which they are in the process of receiving. With that said, as part of these upgrades, there will be removal of sludge from Pond 1 for their project. The quantity is a bit unknown at this point. It'll probably be around 3,000 dry tons. And they will continue to have to maintain and remove sludge over the years to maintain the proper water cap and maintain proper treatment process that is spelled out in their waste discharge order, which is going to be between now San Benito Foods and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. The city of Hollister will no longer be the bearer of the waste discharge order, and really does not need to worry about that issue. As part of the lease agreement clearly spells out that San Benito Food is on the hook for all violations, water quality, air quality. They will have to continue to work with the regional board to make sure that they are in full compliance, and that includes sludge removal. So holding them to a full, an actual value is really not required. The last component in the lease agreement that really holds the city safe is that there is a clause in there that says, essentially, if San Benito Foods were to ever leave the city, terminate the lease agreement, vacate their role, whatever it might be, they are on the hook for all full sludge removal out of Pond 1. And so they cannot leave the city holding the bag of any sludge in that pond this year or in the years to come. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm hoping I clarified some items that may not have been clear last week.
Thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I know I have a lot of questions for you, but I'll ask council first if they have any questions.
Mayor Velasquez, Tim Burns.
Go ahead, Councilmember Burns. Go ahead.
Actually, my question would be for staff, so I'll defer for now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Ms. Wagner, I have some questions here. Now, I understood that they can't remove 50% from Pond 1 in time for the canning season. How much can they remove? The reason I'm asking for the sludge removal is because this has been an ongoing issue for years, and it's, as you know, there's a cap over that, but once it hits, we start experiencing the odors. This sludge has to be moved, whether now or later. And it's okay to give them more time. I'm all right with that, but I don't want to put it off and put it off and put it off. An example of, say, for one reason or another, they do go bankrupt in the future, or they shut down all operations. It's going to be a struggle to remove that sludge later. So, it's being fair here, give them more time, but I do want to see sludge being removed. I don't want it to be another situation where the cap is only 2 feet or 3 feet again, and we start having the odors. This is all about prevention to make sure we never experience what we've been experiencing over the last decade or two.
Absolutely understand. In terms of actual quantities being able to remove in time, I would say probably the maximum that they're going to be able to remove before the canning season is going to be around the 3,000 dry tons realm, which is what they've been anticipating removing this year.
Okay.
That is what they're anticipating removing. So I completely understand your concern, and and rightfully so. You deserve to have that concern. Do note that San Benito Foods also has the concern for odor control. They have that first and foremost as the priority for them. I know that hasn't been the case in the past. I have seen them work very hard over the last few months, really coming to help, to negotiate with the city and come to terms in making sure that this lease agreement is suitable for both San Benito Foods and the city. So for this first year, I would suspect about 3,000 dry tons. Now, we pulled out of Pond 2. Oh goodness, I apologize. I can look up the number, but we're in the upwards of 4,500 dry tons being pulled out of Pond 2 right now.
4,500.
Yeah.
What do we expect is in Pond 2 or Pond 1 now? what's the estimated amount of sludge in there?
Substantially more. Sludge judging, which is what we call it, is very challenging to estimate. Wallace Group estimated at around 12,000 dry tons. Synagro, who is out there doing Pond 2 right now, has estimated upwards of 18,000 dry tons. I would suspect that we're probably going to be in the 15,000 dry tons realm. And that's one of the reasons there is sufficient capacity in that pond to meet the treatment needs for San Benito Foods. If they were to slowly continue to remove sludge over the years to maintain that treatment process, as well as the water cap, and maintain that there's not odor issues. The odor issues don't just come from the sludge. It also comes from the operations of the treatment plant when it starts getting up and going for the canning season, ensuring that they have plenty of aeration going, that they've started the process and planted the seeds properly in the pond 1, and those are all going to be operationally determined in the operations and maintenance manual that's going to be prepared here in the next couple of months. So just like the city of Hollister over the last 2 years has been very forthcoming in making sure that all the aerators are working, San Benito Foods will be doing the same process to ensure that odors do not become an issue in Pond 1, regardless of the sludge quantity that's there.
What is the water cap at now?
That I do not know the answer to. I apologize.
Do you have an estimate what it would be, how many more feet it would be removing 3,000 tons?
The sludge is going to be strategically removed in places where the curtains are going to be installed on the pond, and then some sludge around the edges if necessary. The water cap that is in the pond right now is not the same water cap that is going to be there in a couple of months. For many reasons, is that Pond 1 receives stormwater. And so the ponds right now have to be inadvertently lowered so that there is plenty of capacity for stormwater to come in. As San Benito Foods starts to ramp up the facility, they will start adding water to the ponds, which will increase the water cap from where it is right now.
Correct. So, and again, I just want to make sure we're following through. So if they're going to remove 3,000 tons before this season, what's the estimated removal per year after that?
That part, I'm advising that the city not dictate to San Benito Foods the quantity, just because it's not really required. Again, the city is not really needing to get involved in the waste discharge requirements that's between San Benito Foods and the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
I understand that part of it, but again, we have sludge that eventually needs to be removed. What is a fair amount to be removed every year till we get rid of this, bring that back down to nothing in the ponds? I mean, I understand it's never going to be zero. I get that. But I think it's important that we keep moving towards removing that sludge year after year after year, rather than waiting for it to build up again. You know, I can remember these stories right when this first started with me, my first year dealing with it. And, you know, we found that sludge level was higher than what they realized it was. The storm drains weren't being cleaned properly. And all these pieces together created that first stink bomb that we got to experience, that I got to experience. And it was preventative things like removing sludge and properly cleaning the storm drains that took that away for a year or two. But the minute we took our eyes off of it, it started happening again, and nobody wanted to take responsibility. So rather than be reactive, how do we stay proactive with this so we have a number every year until that thing is down to as low as possible? I don't think it's a wise move to just say we'll move 3,000 out this year and then we'll worry about it when the time comes. I want to make sure we're staying proactive on this thing.
Understand. Brett, I know that I believe Dawn is on the call. Is there a way to have SBF answer that question for the city council?
That would be up to the mayor.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear input that we're going to be partners here working together. We want to make sure that we understand the problems here, and I don't think anyone wants to face these problems again. And we know how it happens every year. So let's be proactive on this. What is your ability per year?
Don, you're on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Brett. Mr. Mayor and council members, again, thank you, as Carrie mentioned, for convening on this issue, on the lease agreement. We have discussed and we understand that sludge removal is a requirement to maintain the operational capacity of that pond. We have not moved forward as far as we want to remove this amount every year because, again, we feel that's really dictated certainly by our permit that'll be coming with the water board. And we certainly, as you, do not want any issues with odor in regards to this permit or us operating the facility. In regards to the costs, and again, many businesses have experienced this. With the pandemic, we primarily service the food service industry and restaurants, if you will. So we are certainly taking a hit on the economic side of things. So from a flexibility standpoint, we haven't discussed a certain amount per year, but we absolutely understand that we need to continue to move forward with the removal as dictated to operate that treatment plant effectively.
Sir, well, we have a 5-year contract we're talking about here with you. And how do we, again, being reasonable, working with you as partners, how do we get to a point, and Carrie, you can jump in any time also, that let's just say this goes for 5 years and you decide at 5 years, 6 years, you're no longer interested in using the facility and we're going to have sludge. How do we remove that sludge over the 5-year period? So we can be fair about this. I want to be fair about this, but I want to make sure we're all clear. That sludge needs to come out. This is just a problem, been out there for too long.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add, San Benito Foods had requested a longer contract of 10 years, and they are putting a substantial amount of capital outlay into upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant as well as their facility. And so I know they are vested in the community, vested in this treatment process, vested in their business, and, you know, are here, you know, wanting to be here for quite some time. This first year, they have a substantial amount of capital outlay that is required. I think over the next few years that they are going to be needing to remove more sludge from the pond. What quantity that is, I don't know. I'm not their engineer who is determining the pond capacity and so forth. Understanding, you know, the odor is an issue, and not wanting to, you know, if they were to leave in 5 years, I could say is if you had, half of the half of the sludge removed by the 5th year as being an acceptable means. Again, we're trying not to, change the lease agreement, trying not to hold them to a value. It's more of holding them to a condition that they are responsible for the treatment, the adequate treatment of the wastewater, compliance with the WDR, meeting air quality requirements and so forth, and that's through the permit. Now, if they end up having any permit violations, air quality violations, I think it's the city's right to be able to renegotiate that issue with them and hold them to a tighter standard.
I get what you're saying, but now we're, again, over the years, we've experienced this many times, and several of the times it was like, we're gonna be fine. We'll be fine this year. Everything is looking good. And then it hits, and then it's like, oops, we should have pulled out more of the sludge, and we should have done certain things. And it's always the oops. But then we as a city have to go explain to the residents that the oops was we weren't enforcing things and we weren't holding people accountable to do what should have been done. So I I see, Mr. Perez. I'll get to you in a second. The question to make sure it's fair is what amount? I mean, we need to have a consistent program. It needs to be budgeted into their program there at the cannery. Is 6,000 tons a year a fair number? But I just really believe it's important that we don't let up on this sludge issue, because it will come back and it will get us again. And again, I know people say, well, it's not an issue until the Air Quality Board gets involved, but that's too late. The accident's happened already. So I want to make sure we have a number that we're clear about and we're consistent on, so we move forward. Mr. Resendez has a question, and Mr. Perez, and then Mr. Burns. Go ahead, Mr. Perez. I'm sorry, not Mr. Perez, Mr. Resendez. I saw his hand up first. Mr. Perez, you'll be next, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Resendez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got some questions for Ms. Wagner. So I'm hearing there's no language that's actually in the contract that's going to protect us or the constituents from the odor. And that's the biggest issue, is what I'm hearing. So I'm just looking at it. If they were to follow all the parameters, everything by the state, are we guaranteed then by the language that's stated in the contract that there will be no odor? If they were to follow everything and they weren't to be out of compliance with the water board's restrictions?
No, there's no guarantee, even if the city were running this, that there would be no odors. But the lease agreement is holding them to operating the facility within their waste discharge requirement, which if they operate it properly with the proper amount of aeration, the proper amount of controls, then there should not be any odors.
Okay.
But unfortunately, sometimes you can't always work with Mother Nature. You know, wastewater treatment plants, oftentimes, regardless of everything that you do, there may be an upset at the pond or a wastewater treatment plant, and outside of anybody's control. So I can't give you a guarantee that there would never be odor controls, but they are providing the operational changes that are required at the facility to best operate the facility and maintain the treatment level that is required. And that includes odor control.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty clear, but I think as public officials, what I think what the mayor is pointing out and what we have to answer to is the first call that we get is the smell. So is there any way that we can include some language that's going to protect not only the city's interests, but our constituents, that we can address it either proactively, like the mayor, which would be ideal, right? Like we address it proactively. If there was 0% sludge in there, then we wouldn't have any type of odor, I would imagine, right?
And no, that's actually not the case.
Okay.
Sludge removal does not guarantee you no odor. Again, wastewater treatment plants don't operate. You know, you can have an upset, a slug of bad wastewater come in, and Mother Nature, you know, goes from 90 degrees outside to 120 degrees, and the aeration levels can't keep up, and all of a sudden you're going to get the pond's going to turn.
So then how would we address that at that time? Like, I completely agree, and I understand where the mayor is coming from. I mean, I understand where San Benito Foods is coming from, but we need some type of protection in there, because now's the time to do it, to negotiate that and to protect our interests and the constituents' interests. What type of clause or what kind of protection can we put in there to ensure that if there is a problem with odor, it's very minimal and it's addressed quickly, or that we prevent it from happening at all? That's my concern, and I think that's what the mayor's saying. We might not know all the data and the scientific facts about how that happens, but we have an obligation to ensure that at least we're proactive about it. We include some language in the contract, or if it does happen, we cease production, and we address that immediately. Because I am also leery of entering into a 5-year contract without addressing that. That's been the biggest issue, that I get complaints as far as constituents. So I understand that, and this is the time to work that out. So if there's something you can suggest that we do that, or maybe we come back at a later time, I think that's pretty reasonable ask. Thank you.
Well, so there is language in the lease agreement already that requires San Benito Foods to operate and maintain the facility to the best standard possible, meaning and meeting WDR and all water and air quality requirements. You're absolutely correct in the fact that from a PR perspective, you guys are going to be the first call, regardless of the fact that you guys are not going to be the ones that are on the hook for these violations anymore. So if there is an air quality violation, the city is not the one responsible for it. San Benito Foods will be the one who will have to report and respond to the air quality board. Understanding though that the PR, it's going to be the city and not San Benito Foods. But from a violation, a potential monetary violation, San Benito Foods will be the one that's on the hook. Again, sludge removal does not guarantee or constitute there's not going to be a potential for an odor violation. That comes in the operations, and that is going to be presented in the operations and maintenance manual. That is a requirement of lease agreement. So before they are capable of operating this year, the lease operations and maintenance manual will be submitted, and their operator will need to maintain the facility in accordance with the operations manual and in accordance with their WDR. But again, you know, we can't ensure anything just because Mother Nature is the one who controls some of those requirements, and we can't control Mother Nature. So
in that sense, we don't have to have a contract with them, right? And then we won't have any odor.
That's, you know, you're
one
absolutely
possibility, right? I'm just saying we need to answer to the constituents. Now we're in a position to be able to protect their interests and to ensure that these things don't happen in the future, or if they do, they're very limited and they're addressed quickly. So I think we're in a good position to do that. And I think we need to, I really do think we need to, because this is a big issue for them on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Perez, go ahead, sir.
So from my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the sludge is not is connected to the smell, but it's not directly connected because of the environmental conditions, Mother Nature. Is that correct?
correct.
Because it's
That is correct.
a creation issue as far as the smell, to my understanding.
The sludge can be a factor in whether or not the ponds turn or if there's not enough capacity, but it is not the direct relationship of what the smell is occurring in the ponds.
Thank you. And with that, so the I would like to see something. I know you were talking about how it's hard to come up with a number to have dredged or cleaned up every year, but one of the things I was, from all the conversations going on, that I was thinking about is the sludge depth. Sludge depth, and it's like it'd be neat to know how much sludge we have there now, how much sludge you've taken out, how many 3,000 pounds,
3,000 dry tons.
dry tons. I mean, what is that, 2 inches? Is that 20 feet?
From an actual number, well, we pulled out 4,500 from pond 2, and that was about 8 to 9 feet in depth, but pond 2 is a smaller capacity than pond 1.
Yeah, because pond 1 is what, about 2.5 the size, 2.5 times the size.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would just, you know what, I agree that, you know what, that there's not enough time for you guys to get at 50%. But I'd like to see you guys still functioning in Hollister. I know there's limited rules and agreements we can put in to control the Mother Nature. But I would also, every year at the beginning of the season, find out what levels we're at and see how much progress that's being done as far as the dredging. Also, I was reading, it says that in roles and responsibilities, it was talking about joint responsibility with the city of Hollister for operations and maintenance of the percolation basins. What is that broken down to already, or is that as per per maintenance request, or when something breaks down, we split the cost at what percentage?
So the percolation beds, essentially, there's the only maintenance that's really required on the percolation basins is that after each of the seasons, well, first of all, you have to, make sure that the weed and rodent abatement, which is being split through different times of the year between the two, between the city and San Benito Foods. The other maintenance that's required at the percolation beds is that they need to be tilled and disked. Meaning, so after the water has percolated, they've got to get maintenance vehicles in there to actually go in and disturb the soil so that the next round of water that comes into the ponds are able to percolate into the ground. Otherwise, you get clogging of the soils, and then the soils don't percolate as easily. And so there are seasons, the report, basically, or the lease agreement basically says that after the canning season, San Benito Foods is responsible for doing the maintenance on the perk beds. After the rainy season, the city is responsible for the maintenance on the perk beds.
And your water source is that, I read someplace where it was, you have your own well and the use of the city water also?
I don't represent the San Benito Foods. I represent the city, but San Benito Foods does have their own well supply on site. And one of the options that they're looking at is potentially connecting to the city. That's part of, and Dawn might be able to provide more information on their what they're planning at their facility. I only know exactly what's going on at the treatment plant right now.
Okay.
And go ahead.
No, that was it.
Mr. Mayor, in terms of quantity, if we could suggest, if that is something that, you are not going to approve this lease agreement without a quantity, is maybe suggesting up to 2,000 dry tons per year to be removed, I think is a reasonable request for San Benito Foods to remove. That would put at the end of the 5 years, that would put 11,000 removed, which would be over 50% of the pond dry sludge removed. They may end up looking for other alternatives to be able to remove sludge more cost effectively over the next few years. And it would be worthy of us to give them opportunity to find those less expensive means of sludge removal and land application process, but not tying them to a number. And again, they're in this for the long haul. They want this lease longer than 5 years. And so the potential, I think after 5 years, we've got more than half the sludge removed. And then we can readdress it at 5 years. We can readdress that and see if it's an issue. If it's not, we continue down that road and path for the years after that to come. And again, the city has a clause in there, and maybe Mr. Epperson can chime in on that, that if they were to go bankrupt, if they were to leave the lease agreement, that there is a clause in there that San Benito Foods is still on the hook for responsibility for removing of the sludge.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns had a question. Go ahead, Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. So actually I have a few. And so Ms. Wagner, can you tell me during the canning season, how much sludge we can anticipate occurring that will be in addition to what may already be there?
No, I cannot answer that. I don't know how much sludge is actually generated during the canning season.
Okay. And as I heard you say, somewhere in Pond 1, estimates have been somewhere between 12,000 and 18,000 tons, and you're approximating maybe 15,000 tons. Is that correct?
Yeah. Again, sludge judging, which is what we call it, is extremely challenging, just because we don't know the full density of the sludge being removed. But yes, that's the estimate right at this moment in time.
Thank you. And you indicated that San Benito Foods is intending to, or I'm not sure, I wasn't clear, already have removed 3,000 dry tons.
They are intending to remove 3,000 dry tons prior to this year's canning season.
And the canning season begins when?
They will be starting up in June.
In June. And so have they proposed to take any out after the canning season?
No, not at this time. As Don Carr had, they have not. They are focused right now on the upgrades that need to happen to Pond 1 in order for them to comply with their WDR, and the upgrades that they have to do at their canning facility in order to meet the requirements. They have not set aside or focused on the long-term sludge removal. That is, kind of a next step. Once they get through this canning season and get through the upgrades, then at that point they will reevaluate what is needed and, a necessity to get removed in order to meet the WDR for the upcoming years. And then they will come up with a plan for that. The regional board may even also, the regional board may step in and put requirements on the WDR for improvements that are required, because they're going to be on a time schedule for that as well.
Thank you. Do you know approximately, or have a sense, or has San Benito Foods disclosed what it will cost approximately to remove the 3,000 dry tons they're proposing to remove?
So we have our contract with, so they are using the same contractor that the city is using for the removal of pond, of sludge from Pond 1 or 2. And the cost for Pond 2 right now is $547 per dry ton. Now, so you could do the math at so 3,000 dry tons times 547. That's $1.6 million just for the 3,000 dry tons. Now, I don't know what cost they've negotiated with Synagro themselves, and they're not a public agency, so I don't necessarily have the ability to ask them that question. They are also looking for alternatives, because that is, that's a pretty good hit, especially when you're talking about 18,000 dry tons at that cost. And so they are looking for other options to potentially land apply the sludge, which would reduce the cost of the sludge removal. And so if they're able to find other options, then they might be able to remove more at a single time.
Thank you. You mentioned that they've indicated that they're investing a significant amount of dollars in other projects related to the cannery and the canning season. Have they disclosed what those dollar figures might look like?
No, but I can guarantee that they're in the millions of dollars. They are installing baffles into the baffle curtains into Pond 1. They are having to remove the sludge, as well as they're having to install a pump station to pump water from Pond 1 into the pipe network system. And then I don't remember if there's any other additional upgrades that they are proposing at this time for Pond 1. And then they have other upgrades that are happening at their actual canning facility, which I don't know the details of those.
Thank you. My next question is actually for City Manager Miller. Mr. Miller, do you know what was the cause of the odors in the past was attributed to? It's my recollection that odor has been a long-going issue, and I've heard Mrs. Wagner indicate that it isn't necessarily directly attributable to sludge. Do we know what caused it in the previous occasions?
I can actually add to that.
Carrie, better at answering that one.
Okay.
So the odor issues in the past have been a failure of aeration. So what happens is that all of a sudden it gets very hot, and there's not enough air in the wastewater, and so it turns. Technical words, it turns, and it produces a foul odor. And so the last 2 years, Mike Chambliss oversaw the operations and ensured that Veolia was running all of the aerators ahead of schedule and increased the aeration within the ponds so that there was sufficient air to ensure that the odors were not an issue. And we have not had an odor complaint in the last 2 years because of this operational style, and the sludge was there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Epperson, can you tell me what the city's recourse is in the event that we do have an odor problem moving forward? I did hear Ms. Wagner indicate that we don't need to worry about the sludge removal, but I'm like many concerned about the odor, and to a certain degree putting the cannery on some sort of an action plan that will get the sludge removed. And particularly since we don't know, or at least I've not heard an answer that we know how much each canning season we add to the sludge accumulation.
Councilmember Burns, we have our normal enforcement procedures under those circumstances, but also one of the main changes between this proposed lease and prior leases, going back as far as I know, decades, is that the cannery itself would be holding the permit with the water board rather than we would. So they would be answerable to them as well. And Ms. Wagner, if there's anything you want to add to that, that would be helpful. If you think I've misdescribed the relationship between the cannery and the water board.
No, you're absolutely spot on. Is in the past, the agreements between San Benito Foods and the city, San Benito Foods was a bystander to the agreement with the regional board. And so the regional board had no enforcement action over San Benito Foods, and only the city could then charge San Benito Foods, and that process was challenging. This lease agreement now that is being put in place is putting San Benito Foods square one in front of the regional board. The regional board, the waste discharge requirement for the operations of wastewater at the industrial wastewater treatment plant will no longer be with the city. The city will have absolutely no interaction with the regional board when it comes to wastewater treatment at this facility. Don't include the domestic facility. At this facility, because the permit will be held between San Benito Foods and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Now the city of Hollister is the bystander. You are just the landowner. You no longer really care what's going on the land. It's their permit. They're the ones that are going to be held financially responsible if there is a violation. They are the ones that are going to have to report everything to the regional board. It is no longer in the city's hands.
Thank you. So, Mr. Epperson, then, for traditional enforcement actions, are we talking lawsuit, or are we talking code enforcement action, or something combined thereof? As others have stated, my concern is I understand that the cannery will be forced to bring their property and deal with things and bring it into compliance. But as Vice Mayor Resendez has said, we're going to have to be responding to people that are going to be complaining. And frankly, I don't think they have an appetite to hear, well, that's really not our problem. And, we're going to do what we need to do. So what does that really look like from a city perspective, sir?
Well, it means that because we're the property owner and we're the holder of the lease, we can enforce those provisions, and I don't know how far I want to go in a public meeting discussing our specific options, but it is true that in the immediate occurrence of an odor or a smell that's causing the community a problem, San Benito Foods would be primarily responsible to the water, would be responsible to the water board for fixing that and making sure that their discharges are in line with all of the requirements of that permit that they have with the water board rather than us. So the fines would flow to San Benito Foods rather than to the city. Our leverage, and again, I only want to go just so far in discovering that, or in discussing that rather, would be primarily limited to altering the changes of the lease agreement or making sure that if it's not complied with, that we take the actions that are consistent with that lease agreement.
Thank you, sir. My final question would be, again, Vice Mayor Resendez brought up the fact that maybe a solution would be, if the problem begins, that San Benito shut down until they correct the problem. Is that a feasible or realistic option that could be included in the contract?
Once the canning season has begun, obviously that sort of thing is more complicated, and I would fully expect that if we reached a point where the city felt that that was necessary, we would end up back in court to resolve that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Epperson. Thank you, Mayor. Those are the only questions and comments I have.
Good questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr.
Councilmember
Mayor.
Resendez?
Thank you so much. Really quick, historically speaking, there's been two problems. Number one is the odor. Number two is who holds the permit. It looks like this contract is addressing one of the two. A question I had that Councilmember Burns pointed out was how much accumulates each year. We don't know the answer to that. So now having that information, if we were to put a number onto it, Ms. Wagner, like 2,000 pounds of dry tons each year, I don't know if that would necessarily address the issue. We have to remember that we're talking about the smell, not just the sludge, because it seems like we've had the same amount of sludge in there the last couple of years, yet there was no smell. So that's something to take into consideration. And I don't feel really comfortable or confident that it's addressing, and I don't want to lock into a 5-year lease. Maybe a suggestion would be that we shorten the length of the lease to a year, and we renew it every year, depending on what that looks like for the canning season. I understand like it's not practical to stop, $1 million operation, but we can come back in a year and assess like, okay, how did it go? Maybe we have the same luck we had the last couple years. There's no smell, same amount of sludge. They're taking out a certain amount of sludge and they're doing things to improve it. Maybe it's not. And then we have to look at, revisiting some of these issues. But I don't know if locking it into a 5-year contract is a good idea, because then we will potentially end up in court for who knows how long. But if we do 1 year, I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. Or San Benito Foods can listen to our concerns and come back with some solutions as to how they can address those. I'm comfortable with that as well, but I'm not comfortable locking into an agreement with what I've heard today for 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, in regard to the smell, in the past, our issue was when we've had smell, we got in trouble with the Monterey Air Quality Control Board, and now that will be the responsibility of the cannery also. Just wanted to add that one real quick.
And
Go ahead.
in
Ms.
terms
Wagner.
of, I'd like just to, in terms of the 1 year versus 5 year, we really did, we went back and forth with San Benito Foods. The city's attorney, Mr. Epperson, and his staff weighed in on that contract length, was negotiated back and forth with San Benito Foods. Again, San Benito Foods is investing a significant amount of capital outlay in these upgrades to the treatment plant, which includes sludge removal. And with that, they are doing everything that they can financially and environmentally responsibly to really step up and take ownership. They have taken the lead on applying for the waste discharge requirement. They are doing the studies that the Regional Water Quality Control Board is going to require in order to determine any groundwater basin impacts. I would highly request that the City Council stick with the 5-year agreement and support the work that your staff and your county council or your City Council has negotiated with San Benito Foods in assuring that the efforts that we've taken over the last few months has been at the best interest for the city.
Thank you. I have a few more questions for you. I heard your comment, the mention that the cannery, San Benito Foods, is willing to look at 2,000 tons per year, dry tons per year, as an effort to keep up with the removal. And I understand them looking for alternative methods. We talked about that in the past about using bugs, and I think they might have found a better source, or they might be using for that, which I understand. The operation is like a freight train. Once it gets going, it's pumping out, what is it, 3 million gallons a day, somewhere around there. I know it's hard to stop, and I understand it's a lot of money to get this thing going again. I just, again, from my experiences, I've had the pleasure of getting to smell those things, and numerous phone calls from people when it goes bad. And from my experience in the past, has taught me it's usually a combination of things, but it's always comes back to, oh, I thought somebody else took care of that this year. And we end up with a very angry community. And really, the failure is on us for not ensuring things were done. I understand clearly sludge is not the only issue that creates the odor, but in most of the cases we've had in the past, they were contributing factors to it. And I can remember one year where everyone thought it was fine. They checked the cap, only to find out later that the sludge had shifted, and that's how come part of that odor had happened. The other contributing factor has been the flushing of the system, of the storm drain system. And that is something, the next question I have for you. I thought I saw somewhere, did it say the city is going to share the cost of cleaning out those storm drains, or is that the South Street line all on San Benito Foods to have a thorough scrubbing of the storm drain, not just a flushing, because that was the other problem we found.
So the South Street, the combination sewer storm drain is going to be maintained the same as it's been in the past agreements, is that they need to flush it, hydrojet it, and remove all solids from the line after every canning season. That is a consistent removal or consistent role and responsibility. After the rainy season, it is the city's responsibility to clean and jet the combination sewer storm drain system to remove any debris that may have accumulated due to storm events. So that has not changed. That language has been the same since we put that in there several years ago into the agreement between the city and San Benito Foods.
And I know that's one of the biggest factors of getting the odor out of down the South Street area.
Absolutely.
Area.
Absolutely.
So the city verifies that it's been jetted to make sure there is nothing in there, no debris after the canning season.
Yes.
The city will verify that. And
yes, San Benito
aware that it's not just a flush, it's actually, jet, scrub, whatever you want to call it, to make sure all of it's out.
Correct. San Benito Foods is required as per the lease agreement to submit CCTV inspection, camera video inspection to the city for inspection to confirm that the lines are clean, as well as the condition of the sewer storm drains have not been compromised due to discharges from San Benito Foods.
Okay. The other question I have, as you know, I'm sure you've gone out to see the aerators yourself. They're out of the 70s or 80s, I believe. They're above surface. Is there plans to introduce a subsurface aerator so we don't have the water spraying into the air?
San Benito Foods, Dawn could probably speak to this better. Obviously, this year there is not time to replace any of the aerators.
I'm thinking about the future here. So
absolutely, they are going to, first of all, those aerators are actually from an energy perspective are extremely inefficient.
Yes.
And so they do end up costing what was the city or San Benito Foods in the past. They're going to cost San Benito Foods, in the future. They are with their engineer. They are looking at alternatives for aeration. And that may be implemented in years to come. Those are long-term operations and maintenance needs that they will address over years to come through their process. Again, those are things that, you know, and I'm going to, please don't take offense. I don't want to micromanage San Benito Foods and their operations. Again, they're going to have to submit an operations and maintenance manual to confer and ensure to the city that they are properly maintaining the facility. But how they do that operations, how they maintain the facility, that is going to be completely on them.
Maybe Mr. Carr can answer some of these questions. If you're there, Mr. Carr.
Yes, Mayor, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
In regards to, so Carrie, excellent job in speaking to the questions and appreciate that. In regards to the water cap depth, there was questions about that. Synagro, the same agency that provided us a survey of the pond. The average water cap depth in pond 1 right now is just over 11 feet. Now, there are certainly areas where there's less water cap and certainly areas that are more. During the dredging, to assure that the baffle curtains are installed correctly, the depth of the pond, that 3,000 tons includes any high spots where there may be a potential for lower water cap depth. So I wanted to clarify that point. In regards to the aerators, you're all absolutely correct. They are not efficient from an energy perspective. There is new technology out there. In the alternative analysis that we hire our engineering firm to conduct and present to the water board, aeration technology is certainly one of those things that we will be looking at. From a timing perspective, in regards to getting in there and assuring the pond is operational prior to season. And again, I understand the questions, I understand the concerns. We are committed to and assuring that we don't have violations or odor issues. But from a timing perspective, we need access to the ponds rather soon to assure that all this work can be done prior to the season. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of investment, not only on the pond with the baffle curtains, the dredging. We're making operational improvements at our plant to capture high juice, high BOD content juice, the better filtering systems. So we're investing a lot and trying to get it done in a short period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. And the final question I'm going to have back to you is, you're all right with the 2,000 tons per year until you come up with either using bugs or something else to take care of it?
So we do currently use a biological treatment. I can't speak to how much is generated every year. I wish I could, but I can't speak to that from a scientific standpoint. But we do use a biological treatment from an odor perspective, as well as a sludge enzyme, if you will. Mm-hmm. In regards to an amount per year, as Carrie mentioned, as we are responsible for the compliance with the WDR, we understand that we have to remove some to assure that we maintain compliance. If we have to commit to something, yes, we can do that. Just certainly, we prefer to keep it as the language in the permit as it current in the draft lease agreement as it currently is. But yes, we could commit to something if we have to.
Okay, so you're willing. I'm just going to assume. I don't want to assume anything, but I'm going to take it as 2,000 a year would be something that is possible. The last question I have of you, maybe the city attorney can be involved in this. Earlier or last year, there was a lawsuit brought against the city. Has your company dropped that lawsuit? Can we be done with this?
Mr. Mayor, this is Jason Epperson. I'll speak first.
Go ahead, sir. Or go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Epperson. Go ahead.
Thank you. The lawsuit has not been dismissed from either side. It's not even what we refer to as at issue yet, which means that San Benito Foods has not yet filed their responsive pleading to our complaint. The concept that was intended was that if this is approved and the parties agree on everything, then both sides would mutually dismiss it. Otherwise, neither side would end up dismissing their complaint against the other. So that was anticipated. If this is approved and if things proceed accordingly, that would be anticipated to occur, I believe, in early to mid-May.
So just for clarification, if we agree to go with this contract and by April, May, the San Benito Foods decides they don't want to drop the lawsuit, can we have a clause in there that voids that contract? I don't think it would be. I mean, we're going to go in there. Basically, we're going to be partners in this, whether we like it or not. But I don't want to be in a situation where there's a lawsuit over our head. That should never have happened. We should have been able to work together. That lawsuit never should have taken place. But I want to make sure we don't have that out there. So, Mr. Carr, would you be able to speak to that, or is that another representative of your company?
I believe there are attorneys on the line, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Carr, is your attorney on the line?
I do not believe so, Mr. Mayor. That is something I can certainly take back with our team and confirm that.
Okay. That is all the questions. Mr. Burns, Councilman Burns, did you have another question? I see your hand up.
I'm sorry, I do not, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay.
I do. I have a question.
Oh, Councilman Perez, go ahead, sir.
Actually, more just a comment. You know what? Since we don't know how much sludge or debris is being accumulated every year, I think it's to come up with saying that we need to take out 2,000 dry tons. Kind of hard. I mean, you have no number to start with. How do you come up with a number? So it'd be, I don't know if they can come up with the number. But if they're going to take out 2,000 dry tons and they're putting in 2,000, we don't know how much they're putting in. So it's like, how do we come up with that number? Is my question. And that's why I would like to add something in there to get like that yearly, or said something about a yearly analysis. And if we could put something in there that would be like, again, the depth of the sludge, because we just got to come up with, we can't come up with numbers unless we have a number to start with. That's my thinking. But for the 5 year, I like San Benito. I really appreciate them investing into our community. I know they're going to do the right things as far as the trying to keep the smell down as much as possible. The city and San Benito Foods have been working together great these last 2 years, because I'm near that area too. That's pretty much it. I'd like to get some verbiage in there to get a yearly analysis of where we're at with the sludge, and before, yeah, at the beginning of the season when you guys come back in. 5 years sounds great to me.
Can we,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, can
You can explain how it's measured every year?
Mr. Mayor, in terms of it being measured every year, we would hire a company such as Synagro or another company, and they go out and they do what they call sludge judging. It's basically they stick a tube down into the sludge, and then they figure out what the depth is, and then they run analysis at a lab to determine the density of the sludge. And so they'll do that at various locations throughout the pond, and so forth. Can I request or make a suggestion in terms of, as I've mentioned, there is an operations and maintenance manual that is going to be required of San Benito Foods for this facility. And I think much of your concerns revolve around the operations and maintenance manual. And that is a requirement in the lease agreement. Can I suggest that we hold, and I'm doing this on for a reason. Can we hold the lease agreement as the lease agreement is stated, presented to you right now, with the notion that the operations and maintenance manual is a required document that the San Benito Foods will have to update annually and provide to the city of Hollister, with sufficient information discussing how they are sludge judging every year, the quantity of sludge, providing the city with a report on the operations of the facility and their means and methods on how they are going to control odors. And that document come back and be submitted either to staff directly for approval or to city council to your council if you so deem it appropriate. But that be the mechanism for evaluating the true operations of the facility and holding San Benito Foods accountable for their operations.
Thank you. I understand what you're saying, but those should be in place anyways. I mean, that's just part of what should be happening. I think at least I'm just speaking for myself, my concern is, again, making sure we're ahead of this thing so it never catches us again. Removing sludge is should be an annual maintenance part of this situation. Now, I've heard the number 2,000. I'm all right with working with 2,000 if they're going to pull out 3,000. And I think Councilmember Perez makes a very good point of having that measurement each year to see where we're at. I'm happy to hear that we have an 11-foot cap right now. That gives me some confidence. But it's not just about, for me, not only about odor, it's about making sure we're removing that sludge out of those ponds sooner rather than later. I remember those conversations early on where it was not a big deal. It could stay there until it became a big deal. So it's just part of being proactive. I want to make sure that we're going to be working with the cannery here, that they are in the process of removing some of that sludge. And I do want to see a manual that talks about maybe the subsurface aerators or their plans for the future, because we all know, as you pointed out, or Mr. Carr pointed out, they are highly, they're massive energy takers, the ones that are there now, and they don't do anybody any favors. So I'm sure new aerators subsurface would help them financially in the long term, and helps us with odor issues. So I don't think I think we need to make sure we're clear about the removing of the sludge annually, and I think we could make improvements on the annual report or the conditions, however you want to put that we're reviewing every year, because I think that is very important. I've found in the past where we agreed on something and within 2 years, everybody was lax again, and then we had the problem roar back and everybody kind of regroups and said, oops, as I said, we didn't realize the sludge shifted to another area, and that's where our problem came from. Or as we found, starting earlier to get the oxygen levels into the water, or the bugs working earlier, was very beneficial. So all these little pieces help us if we can have that clarity going in. But I am going to keep insisting on continuing to remove sludge. And I think if 2,000 tons is fair to the cannery, we can proceed that down that direction. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the issue of the ongoing lawsuit, I want to make sure that that is squared away and we're clear on that. If there's an ongoing lawsuit, I don't think we can continue as partners. So any other questions or comments from council members?
Just one last statement in regards to Councilmember Perez's concern about more sludge going in than what they're removing. I do not think that is the case. I can't give you definitive numbers on how much they're generating in sludge per year, but the facility itself, it's a biological system, and the amount of wastewater that's going in there are the bugs in the treatment, in the wastewater treatment plant. They are continually degrading and decomposing the sludge that's in there. And so it has its own treatment process that is occurring year after year. And so the concern of them not remember, this facility hasn't had sludge removed in decades, and there's 18,000 dry tons. It's not being generated to that level of more than 2,000 dry tons a year. And again, as an operations and maintenance manual, we will evaluate it on an annual basis to confirm. But in all sense and purposes, San Benito Foods is going to be held responsible by the Regional Water Quality Control Board as the utmost, regulatory authority of maintaining that facility to the level that it is needed to meet water quality objectives. And they're going to be required to do that in order to comply with the treatment process. Because if there's too much sludge in that pond, they don't have adequate treatment time. They don't have adequate time to comply, to meet the treatment levels that are required to reduce the BOD levels and the nitrate levels and so forth in the system before they can discharge. And so if there's too much sludge in that pond, they can't treat the water properly and they will not meet the WDR. So that is the ultimate, holding of how much sludge can actually be in that pond, is when they're not capable of meeting their WDR.
Thank you. One question I don't think was answered. I don't know if it was Mr. Burns that asked the question or Mr. Resendez, Mr. Carr, about are they going to be using more or start using city water? Maybe it was Mr. Perez, or they can continue with the well water. What is the future plans on that?
This is Don. So in regards to that question, again, one of the strategies in compliance with the WDR is analyzing our source water. And we are currently well water. There are various options, which include potentially substituting with an amount of city water, ASR wells to recharge the groundwater with better water. So the source water is absolutely an option we have to look at in regards to compliance with the WDR.
Thank you.
If I can, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Resendez, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So a couple of points that I got from the conversations, and I probably will feel comfortable supporting this, is that we asked them to remove 2,000 dry tons of sludge a year. I still would like for them to bring the manual back each year and for them to continue operations, whether we approve the manual or not, whether it's staff or us. I'm comfortable with either one, but that'll address my least concerns. And then the last is a clause for them not to sue us. If we had those three things in place, then I would feel comfortable moving forward with it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council members? So that would be, again, 3,000 tons this year, which is already planned, and then 2,000 per year. Also, as Mr. Council Member Perez mentioned, a detailed analysis of the level of the sludge each year so we get a better idea. Maybe that will help us understand the level of sludge created each year after the season also. Is that all right with the council?
Good.
All right. City Attorney, and we're gonna also, the issue of making sure the lawsuit, there is no ongoing lawsuit, will be addressed in this.
That's right. And just to point out what I think is probably obvious to the council, this would be considered direction to staff. We'll need to go back and discuss this with San Benito Foods rather than actually vote on the lease itself this evening, because written changes would need to be made to that.
Okay, so we can go back and just again confirm everything. The 3,000 ton that was planned this year, 2,000 per year, a report, an analysis, a report of the how they're operating the facility each year, and a analysis of the depth of that sludge each year. And hopefully we'll get more detail as far as how much sludge was created from that year, the canning season. And then finally, the issue of the lawsuit, no lawsuit, no existing lawsuits. Would that be the consensus of the council?
How does that work for San Benito Foods? I mean, are we going to be able to do this in time for them to, I mean, because they do have the dredging to do. I guess what I'm trying to say is if we can do this in a timely process, that way they have adequate time to. I went out there and I seen the process, and it's pretty amazing. It's time consuming, but it is time consuming, and I'd like to, if we're going to be partners, so to speak, work well with them too, to get them adequate time to get that 3,000 dry tons.
City Attorney, how long would it take? City Attorney, how long would it take to get this together?
Oh, I'm sorry. It depends on if San Benito Foods agrees with these terms or if they have other terms involved. Now, as far as what it would take for them, what their drop dead deadline is for them to get out there and actually begin work on it, I have no idea. Perhaps Ms. Wagner or Mr. Carr could add that information for us.
I would actually like to provide some input on that. San Benito Foods was actually hoping to get onto the site. So staff, Mr. Miller, and we've not allowed San Benito Foods on site onto the industrial wastewater treatment plant to start making any alterations to the plant without the signing of this lease agreement. They are up against a huge time schedule. They've got to start sludge removal. They've got to start pulling the aerators and all the cables and making corrections and moving. So they have to reconfigure the aerators as part of this process. And so they've got all of the mooring facilities, all of the blocks and everything that have to get moved for these aerators. That is all work that has to get done in the next 2 months.
Plus, they're also adding the bafflers, right?
As well as adding the baffles. And so this is a substantial undertaking on them, and they have requested multiple times of staff to be able to get on site immediately so that they can start this process. And we've held them off. They were hoping last week, but with the lease agreement changes that were added in there, that we still held off until tonight's meeting. And so I understand your concerns, and obviously, you know, if that is the route that the council is wishing to do, and I understand Mr. Epperson's, you know, needs to, we've got to get these clarifications from San Benito Foods on whether or not they agree to these terms, and maybe Mr. Carr can already step in and say that they can. I'm not sure if he has that ability to do that or not. But one request would be is whether or not we have the ability to allow San Benito Foods to start their modifications to the treatment plant, with understanding that we are negotiating with them and we are working partner with San Benito Foods in this process.
Mr. Carr, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. So as Carrie mentioned, the time frame to get in there, the reconfiguration of pond 1 is very extensive. The baffle curtains, the length and the dredging to accommodate those baffle curtains. We are moving every aerator in the pond, and with that, prior to dredging and moving the aerators, we have to basically remove the power cables and stanchions to get the aerators out of the way to dredge the pond. So again, there is a significant amount of work in regards to moving forward. As far as the terms, obviously I would have to take that back to my team to review these terms. I would make a request with the council for consideration. Is there a way to prove the lease agreement as is and address these concerns through the O&M manual so that we could get access to the site to begin work?
City Attorney, you can answer that.
It can be done that way, and I'm not saying that I'm opposed to doing it that way. However, the council would need to be aware that there's no guarantee that it would successfully follow through. In other words, that we would obtain the terms that the council is expressing that it wants if it's done that way.
And I agree. Mr. Carr, if you can talk to your company, I'm sure we get this work out rather quickly. Really comes down to your company. And City Attorney, how long would it, if their company were to call tomorrow and say, yeah, we're okay with these terms, how long would it take to draft that and get that ready?
I would expect that it could probably be done within a couple of days, 1 to 2 days.
So we can do this rather quickly, Mr. Carr, so we can keep moving forward. And I agree. I think, I don't know if putting into an O&M manual is the answer. We have a few different issues there as far as the ongoing lawsuit. Some of these commitments, long-term commitments. Mr. Burns, you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yes, Mayor, thank you. I'm wondering, it seems like this is time sensitive and urgent. I'm wondering if we could tentatively schedule a follow-up emergency meeting to push this thing forward as soon as possible.
I think we could. I think it would just be a matter of the city attorney having it ready based on the company's willingness to agree to the terms.
Or
are you saying set a date certain, Mr. Burns, or should we wait till they get that drafted?
Well, either a date certain or is there a way that it could be put on Monday's council agenda at this time?
I think that
Well, the
might be
next
late.
Monday agenda, regular agenda, I believe would be 2 weeks away. We have a fifth Monday, so perhaps there could be another special meeting next Monday, which I believe is the 30th. Excuse me, it's the 29th.
And I'm open to a special meeting again to make sure this is taken care of. That's all right with the council.
I'm open to a special meeting.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. Mr. Burns, are you all right with that?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a consensus there. So if we can step back, Mr. Carr, if you can speak to your company, I think there's a consensus of what we talked about here from the council. You can speak to your company, get that worked out so the city attorney can draft the documents. We can wrap this up for you.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Ms. Wagner.
is there any special consideration that we can allow San Benito Foods to start some of the improvements on the pond one this week, prior to approval of the lease agreement?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Sines, go ahead.
Thank you. If they were to agree to the terms tonight, then I would say that we can do that because I wouldn't be hesitant. But I think that we need to decide as far as protecting the interests of the city, and I'm not real comfortable with that. So hopefully we can get an answer for them by Monday, or they can agree to the terms tonight, would be my position.
Mr. Carr, I know you do have to go back to your company, but I would agree. I think we should wrap up these things, be done with this so we can all move forward. So I think we could have that special meeting by Monday. Just draft these, and Mr. Carr, if you can get to your company as soon as possible, maybe that would be even sooner if you can. Well, what's today already? It's geez, it's Monday. Mr. Carr, so it's up to your company.
Understood.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Do we have direction to city attorney?
I believe so, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Thank you. City manager, do you have any questions or comments?
Sure. No comments.
Okay, so there was a consensus as we spoke about here with the council.
So just real quick, so about allowing them access to the property. So if they had access, I mean, because basically what they're doing, they're investing their money. And it's like, if I'm not really concerned about them backing out like that. I'm more concerned about the liability aspect. I mean, if there was, personally, I understand what Vice Mayor Resendez and you, Mayor, are talking.
Still on it. Let me call you right back.
But the I know we're gonna hammer something out here, and I just really would like to work with the San Benito Foods, as long as there was no liability to us. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, there's a potential liability once they step onto our grounds, so that would be the concern. Because once they sign the agreement, they hold us hold harmless.
Okay.
Okay, may I make a comment regarding the work that we would request access to beginning this week?
Go ahead, sir.
So the work in regards to access is really a preparation to assure the dredging can be completed timely. At 60 to 70 tons per day of dredging, that puts us out there an extensive time frame. The access would be for our contracted operation company to go in there and begin moving, unhooking aerators. So that is the scope of the work that we'd be talking about to assure that we can start the dredging in a timely manner.
I think we all understand it's very important to get moving on this, but I think if we can just get this agreement signed and done, it would make everyone feel more comfortable. I know last year we had some issues, and we don't want to repeat our experiences from last year. So if you can speak to your company, and the sooner you can get a decision back, the sooner we can schedule this meeting, special meeting to move forward on this contract. Is there a possibility you can get the answer back from your company by tomorrow?
Yes, there is. If that were to occur, could we follow up sooner than Monday?
We could if you, if it takes, we have to post, there's posting timelines, but if you can get the response back enough sooner and have our city attorney can draft it and we can have a special meeting sooner than Monday.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone all right with that? City
Most
manager?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Like, one thing I was gonna bring up, don't forget about public comment.
Yeah, let me, was there any other questions, comments from council?
Sounds good. Hopefully we can get this together and meet on Friday.
Thank
No?
you. Yeah, as soon as possible, you can do it. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, do we have any comments from public?
We have a couple people that registered. I'm not sure if they're here for public comment. One person is Dennis Dow. If you registered to make a comment, go ahead and unmute you.
This is Dennis. I don't have any comments.
Thank you, sir.
The only other person was Sam Humphrey. I'm not sure if he's here for public comment.
He is part of San Benito Foods. Mr. Humphrey, did you have any comments? Okay, I don't believe he does.
So there's no other speaker cards.
Thank you. So we'll move forward with the direction given from City Council. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I have is this resolution going to be withdrawn or just no motion made?
Going to go back to drawing board. How would you, city attorney?
Yeah, just no motion made would be fine.
Yeah, just a consensus to make adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Did I hear another council member asking a question? No. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Yes.
We can't hear you. Nova, I'm sorry. We can't hear you.
I'll start over. Councilmember Perez,
Yes.
Councilmember Spencer, Councilmember Burns,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Resendez,
Yes.
Mayor Resendez. Mayor Velasquez, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yes.
I like the sound of that.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Hi.
Good night. Thank you.